Trash shouldn't even be allowed to pump gas here. Move along before this gets ugly." The words cut through the moment as Elijah steadied himself against the metal pump, his balance shifting, but his expression unchanged. His eyes didn't waver. The young man in front of him, smug, careless, radiating untouchable confidence, stepped in close, pointing a finger inches from Elijah's chest like he owned the ground beneath them. A few bystanders lingered nearby, watching in silence, the tension thick and suffocating. Gas dripped onto the concrete between their feet, the sharp smell hanging in the air. Elijah said nothing, only adjusting his stance, his calm unshaken, because the man looming over him had no idea he was confronting the very judge who would soon decide his future. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The midday sun beat down on the Vale Fuel and Mart like it had a grudge to settle. Heat waves danced above the cracked pavement, making the world shimmer and bend. Judge Elijah Brooks guided his rental sedan, a sensible gray four-door that matched his quiet dignity, into the station and pulled up beside Pump 3. He stepped out carefully, his light summer suit crisp despite the heat. At 58, Elijah moved with the measured precision of a man who'd spent decades considering his actions before taking them. He was tall, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. His tie remained perfectly knotted, despite the punishing temperature. Across the lot, Trent Holloway leaned against a truck so high off the ground it practically needed a ladder. The vehicle gleamed with fresh wax and oversized tires, the kind meant to broadcast power rather than serve a purpose. At 26, Trent had his father's square jaw and his mother's blue eyes, but neither parent's sense of restraint. Two friends flanked him, their laughter too loud for the sleepy gas station. "Man, that's what I told him," Trent was saying, voice carrying across the concrete. "You don't tell me what to do in my own town." He took a swig from a can wrapped in a paper bag that fooled exactly no one. Elijah paid them no mind. He was here for a purpose, to visit Reverend Samuel Price at the church where his mother had once organized for voting rights. Not to engage with local noise. He reached for his wallet as he approached the pump. Inside the store, Monica Vale watched through the wide front windows. At 41, she'd owned this station for nearly 7 years, long enough to recognize trouble brewing. She set down her inventory clipboard, eyes fixed on the scene outside. Monica knew Trent Holloway all too well. Chief's son. Town menace. Bad news wrapped in an expensive shirt. Trent's eyes locked onto Elijah, tracking him like a predator noting something out of place. "Well, well," he said loudly to his friends. "Look what the bus dropped off." His friends snickered on cue. Elijah inserted his credit card into the pump reader, his back to the commentary. "Hey, buddy," Trent called out. "You lost? Country Club's about 30 miles that way." He pointed vaguely down the highway, earning more laughs. Elijah entered his zip code and selected regular, unleaded. His movements remained unhurried, deliberate. Trent's smile tightened. Being ignored was not in his playbook. He pushed off from his truck and sauntered toward Pump 3, his boots scraping across the pavement. "I'm talking to you, fancy man," Trent said, stopping a few feet from Elijah. "You passing through or just slumming?" Elijah removed the nozzle from the pump and turned toward his gas tank. His eyes flicked briefly toward Trent. An acknowledgement, nothing more, before returning to his task. Inside, Monica stepped closer to the window. Her hand hovered near the phone. "You got hearing problems?" Trent stepped directly into Elijah's path, forcing the older man to pause. "Or are you just too important to talk to regular folks?" "Excuse me," Elijah said finally. His voice was deep, controlled. "I'm trying to get gas." Trent grinned, scenting engagement. "Oh, it speaks. And with such nice manners, too." Elijah's face remained impassive. "If you could step aside, please." "If you could step aside, please," Trent mimicked in a high, mocking tone. His friends hooted. "Man, who talks like that around here? You some kind of professor or something?" "I'm just a man trying to fill his tank," Elijah said. Trent looked Elijah up and down, taking in the polished shoes, the pressed slacks, the understated watch. "Nah, you're not just anything. Coming in here, acting all superior." "I'm not acting anything," Elijah said. "I'd like to get my gas and be on my way." Trent shifted, deliberately blocking the path to Elijah's gas cap. "Maybe I don't want you on your way just yet. Maybe you should learn how we do things here." The temperature seemed to rise another 10 degrees. Monica pushed open the door and took a step outside, unsure what to do, but knowing she couldn't just watch. Elijah tried to step around Trent to reach his car. As he moved, Trent shifted too, shoulders colliding. It wasn't quite a shove, but it wasn't accidental either. "Watch yourself," Trent said, though he'd caused the contact. Elijah straightened, finally looking Trent directly in the eyes. Something in that steady gaze, the complete absence of fear, the clear assessment, made Trent's smirk falter for just a moment. "You need to move," Elijah said. Not a request this time. The statement hung in the air, simple and firm. The lack of panic or pleading in Elijah's tone cut through Trent's swagger like a blade. For a brief moment, confusion crossed the younger man's face. People didn't talk to him that way in this town. Not when they knew who his father was. The confusion quickly hardened into rage. Trent's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. The small audience of friends fell silent, sensing the shift from harassment to something uglier. Monica rushed toward the door, heart pounding against her ribs. She'd seen that look on Trent's face before. It never ended well for whoever stood in his path. The heat shimmered off the concrete as Trent stepped closer, his fist beginning to clench. It happened in a blur. "Who do you think you are?" Trent snarled. His face flushed crimson. His hand shot out before Elijah could respond, knocking the phone from Elijah's grasp. The device clattered across the pavement, skidding under the car. Elijah's eyes flicked to his fallen phone, then back to Trent. "That was unnecessary!" Trent lunged forward, grabbing fistfuls of Elijah's jacket. "I'll show you unnecessary!" The punch came fast, a wild, angry swing that connected with the side of Elijah's face. The impact sent the older man stumbling sideways, his shoulder crashing against the metal gas pump. Elijah's hand flew to his lip, where blood had already begun to well. "Stop it!" Monica shouted, running full speed now across the lot. "Trent Holloway, you stop that right now!" A paper cup someone had left on top of the pump toppled, spilling sticky soda across the concrete. Someone gasped. A car door slammed as a mother hustled her child back into their vehicle. Trent was all performance now, playing to his audience. He stepped forward and yanked Elijah by the jacket again, pulling him away from the pump. "Think you're better than me?" he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. "This is how we teach respect around here. You understand that? You understand me now?" Elijah didn't swing back. He didn't shout. He simply raised his hands in a defensive position, regained his footing, and wiped the blood from his lip with his thumb. His eyes never left Trent's face. The calmness, the absolute control in Elijah's expression, was unsettling. It wasn't fear or shock. It was assessment, calculation, as if he were memorizing every detail of Trent's face, every word, every movement. "I got cameras on all the pumps," Monica called out, her voice trembling but determined. "Every bit of this is being recorded." A burly truck driver who'd been filling up at the diesel pump pulled out his phone. The camera light blinked red as he pointed it toward the altercation. "I'm filming too," he announced loudly, his deep voice carrying across the lot. Trent's friends exchanged nervous glances. One of them took a step back. "Hey, Trent, maybe that's enough," one muttered, tugging at his sleeve. "Let's just go." But Trent was too far gone, too committed to his performance. He still gripped Elijah's jacket with one hand, the other forming another fist. "You don't come to my town acting all high and mighty," he spat. "You hear me?" Elijah looked directly into Trent's eyes, his voice low but perfectly clear. "I hear you, and I want you to hear me. You need to let go of me now." He paused, each word measured and precise. "The next decisions you make will follow you for the rest of your life." Something in that statement, the certainty of it, made Trent hesitate. The wild anger in his eyes flickered with the first hint of doubt. Monica had reached them now, standing just behind Trent. "Let him go," she demanded. "Your daddy isn't here to clean up your mess this time." Trent's grip on the jacket tightened. "You stay out of this. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Monica shot back, finding courage in her fury. "A grown man who still hides behind his father's badge." Around them, the audience had grown. Customers who'd been inside the store now stood at the entrance. Cars had stopped arriving, drivers sensing trouble and passing by. One of Trent's friends had backed all the way to their truck. "You're making a big mistake," Trent growled at Elijah, but the initial fire was dimming in his eyes, replaced by something less certain. Monica looked at Elijah properly for the first time, at his dignified bearing despite the assault, at the calm intelligence in his eyes. Recognition suddenly flashed across her face. "Oh my God!" she blurted out. Her hand flew to her mouth. "I know you. You're Judge Elijah Brooks, the federal judge." The words landed like a thunderclap. "What?" Trent's voice cracked. "I recognize you from the newspaper article, the one in Reverend Price's office. He has it framed on his wall." Monica's words tumbled out faster now. "You're the judge who ruled on that big civil rights case last year." Trent's face drained of color. His grip on Elijah's jacket loosened, fingers uncurling as if touching something suddenly scalding hot. He took a small step backward. "A judge," he whispered. The smug confidence that had animated Trent's every movement seconds before vanished completely. His face transformed. Shock, then disbelief, then the first traces of genuine fear washed over his features in rapid succession. "I didn't," Trent started, his voice pitched higher than before. "This is a misunderstanding. I thought—" His words died in his throat. He glanced desperately at his friends, but they were already distancing themselves, no one wanting any part of what had just happened. Elijah straightened his jacket with dignity, still saying nothing. The silence stretched between them. Trent standing frozen, his bravado shattered against the realization of who he had just assaulted, and Judge Elijah Brooks, watching him with eyes that missed nothing. Trent Holloway stared at Elijah with his mouth hanging open. The confidence that had powered his swagger moments earlier seemed to drain out through the soles of his boots. His face, flushed with aggression seconds before, now turned the color of sour milk. "A Fed? A federal judge?" Trent's voice cracked. He looked wildly around at the witnesses, the reality of what he'd done crashing down on him. "No, I didn't. I wasn't." He took another step back, nearly tripping over himself. His hands, still clenched into fists moments ago, now fluttered uselessly in front of him. "You got the wrong idea," he said, the words tumbling out. "This was just a misunderstanding between men, right?" He forced a weak laugh that died instantly in the heavy afternoon air. Elijah touched his fingertips to his split lip. A thin line of blood had formed at the corner of his mouth. He remained silent, his eyes never leaving Trent's face. "Look, sir, I'm sorry about that. Look, sir, I'm sorry about that," Trent continued, desperation rising in his voice. He reached out as if to brush something from Elijah's jacket, then pulled back when Elijah didn't move. "I didn't know. I mean, if I had known who you were, that I was someone with power." Elijah finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent lot. Trent's eyes widened. "No, that's not what I meant." But everyone heard the truth in Elijah's question. Trent wouldn't have backed down if Elijah had been a regular person. Only now that he faced consequences did he care. A tear actually formed in Trent's eye, not from shame or regret, but from the pure terror of facing consequences. He looked around at his friends for support, but they had retreated to their truck, suddenly fascinated by their phones. Please, Trent whispered, panic naked on his face. My dad. Ms. Vale, Elijah said, turning to Monica with measured dignity. Would you please call law enforcement? And I'd appreciate if you could secure all security footage from the last 30 minutes. Monica nodded, still shaken. Yes, sir. I have 4 cameras covering this area. Everything's recorded. I got most of it right here, called the truck driver, holding up his phone. Been filming since I saw this punk put hands on you. Not going anywhere till the cops show. Elijah nodded his thanks. I'd appreciate a copy of that. For a brief, perfect moment, justice seemed clear and simple. Witnesses had seen it. Cameras had captured it. The truth stood in plain daylight with nowhere to hide. Trent's panic deepened. Wait, hold on. We don't need to involve anyone else. I said I was sorry. It was just a little misunderstanding. No one responded to him. His status in this space had vanished like morning mist. Elijah could have used his title right then. He could have mentioned federal charges, civil rights violations, or assault on a judge. He could have crushed Trent with the full weight of his position. Instead, he simply said, the proper authorities should handle this matter correctly. That's how the system is meant to work. Monica looked at Elijah with newfound respect. This wasn't a man throwing his weight around. This was someone who believed in doing things the right way. I'll get the first aid kit, she said, hurrying toward the store. The witnesses remained, small clusters of people talking in low voices, no one willing to leave before officers arrived. Trent's friends had moved even farther away, leaning against their truck with the unmistakable body language of men who wanted no part of whatever came next. Elijah bent down carefully and retrieved his phone from the concrete. The screen was cracked across one corner, but it still worked. He opened the camera and quietly began documenting the scene. The gas pump, the spilled drink, his own bloodied lip reflected in the side mirror of his car. Sir, please, Trent tried again, his voice barely above a whisper now. My dad's the chief. He'll be really upset. We could work this out between us. Elijah looked at him for a long moment. Some things can't be worked out between us, he said finally. Some things need to be witnessed. Monica returned with a small first aid kit and handed Elijah a clean tissue for his lip. The afternoon heat pressed down on all of them, the tension making the air feel even thicker. In the distance, a siren wailed faintly. Trent's face brightened with desperate hope. That's probably my dad, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The police cruiser appeared at the entrance to the lot, lights flashing but siren now silent. It pulled in slowly, the officer inside taking in the scene through the windshield before stopping. Before the officer could even exit his vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows swung in behind the cruiser, tires crunching on the loose gravel at the edge of the lot. The SUV's door opened immediately. Chief Dale Holloway stepped out, his face a mask of professional concern that didn't reach his eyes. He scanned the scene with practiced efficiency, his son standing alone and shaking, the witnesses with phones out, Monica beside the judge with the first aid kit, the blood on Elijah's lip. In that first calculating look, Elijah saw everything he needed to know. This wasn't a father rushing to a scene in shock or disappointment. This was a man with power assessing a threat to his control. The real trouble was only beginning. Deputy Nolan Pierce stepped out of his cruiser first, tugging at his uniform as if preparing for inspection. His eyes flickered nervously between the gathered witnesses and Judge Brooks. He pulled out his notepad, his movements stiff and mechanical. "Afternoon, folks," he called out. "Everything all right here?" Before anyone could answer, Chief Dale Holloway emerged from his SUV. Despite the heat, his uniform remained crisp and unwrinkled, not a single badge or button out of place. He moved with practiced confidence, his face set in an expression of professional concern that never quite reached his eyes. "Deputy Pierce," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I was nearby when the call came in. Thought I'd assist." Dale's gaze swept across the scene, taking in every detail. The witnesses with phones out. Monica standing protectively near Elijah. the bloodied tissue in Elijah's hand. When his eyes landed on his son, something flickered across his face too quickly to read. "Trent," he said evenly. "You okay, son?" Trent straightened immediately at his father's voice. "Yeah, Dad. I'm fine." Some of his earlier panic had already begun to fade, replaced by something closer to relief. Dale positioned himself strategically between Trent and the witnesses, creating a subtle barrier. He turned to Elijah with a practiced smile. "Sir, I understand there was some heated misunderstanding here. I'm Chief Holloway." He extended his hand as if they were meeting at a community barbecue, rather than after his son had assaulted someone. Elijah did not take the offered hand. "Judge Elijah Brooks," he said clearly, making sure everyone heard his full title. "And this wasn't a misunderstanding, Chief Holloway. Your son assaulted me, unprovoked, at Pump 3. A muscle in Dale's jaw tightened briefly before the smile returned. "Well now, that's a serious claim. Deputy Pierce, let's get statements from everyone while memories are fresh." Pierce nodded and flipped open his notepad. "Ma'am," he said to Monica, "you saw what happened?" Monica stepped forward. "I did. I was watching from inside. Trent blocked the judge from using the pump, then got in his face when the judge wouldn't back down. Then he knocked the judge's phone down and threw the first punch." Dale raised a hand. "Now, Ms. Vale, I know you believe that's what you saw, but these things happen quickly. It's easy to misread the sequence of events, especially through a window." "I wasn't looking through a window," Monica countered, her voice rising. "I was right at the door." "Even so," Dale continued smoothly, "perceptions can be tricky. Depth, angles, they all play tricks on the eyes." The truck driver stepped forward, phone in hand. "I got some of it on video. The part where your son grabbed him and hit him." Dale's smile didn't waver as he turned to the trucker. "That's very helpful, sir. We'll need to see that footage and get your contact information." "Deputy?" Pierce moved toward the truck driver, but everyone noticed how Dale followed, hovering just behind his deputy's shoulder. "Name and phone number?" Pierce asked. "Ray Donovan. I'm just passing through. Got a delivery schedule to keep." The trucker hesitated before adding his number to Pierce's notepad, his eyes darting toward Dale. "Well, Mr. Donovan, we appreciate your cooperation," Dale said, his tone friendly but his eyes hard. "We'll need that video sent to the department email before you leave, for evidence purposes." The truck driver nodded uneasily, clearly sensing the threat beneath Dale's polite words. Trent, meanwhile, had recovered enough to start reshaping his version of events. "He came at me first," he muttered to his father. "I was just defending myself." Dale gave a small nod. "Deputy, make sure you note that in your report. There may have been aggressive movements from both parties." Elijah watched the scene unfold with growing clarity. This was not new to him. This careful manipulation of facts before they could solidify into evidence. This transformation of truth into something malleable. He'd seen it in courtrooms for decades, but rarely so blatantly performed in the open. "Chief Holloway," Elijah said calmly, "I'd like to give my statement now. On the record." Dale nodded pleasantly. "Of course, Judge. We want to be thorough." For the next several minutes, Elijah provided a measured account of every detail. Trent's initial harassment, the blocking of the pump, the phone being knocked down, the punch. He spoke with judicial precision, noting times, positions, and exact words exchanged. Through it all, Dale maintained his facade of attentiveness, but Elijah caught him twice, subtly directing Pierce to phrase things differently in his notes. "And I'd like to formally request that all security footage be preserved," Elijah added, "from every angle." "Absolutely," Dale said. "Ms. Vale, I trust your system is working properly?" Monica nodded. "It is, and I saved today's files separately already." Something hardened in Dale's eyes, but his voice remained pleasant. "Good thinking. Though we'll need to have our technical team verify the timestamps, of course." "Standard procedure." The sun had begun to sink lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Most of the witnesses had given brief statements and drifted away, sensing the subtle pressure from Dale's presence. Even the truck driver had reluctantly returned to his rig, after forwarding his video to the department email that Pierce provided. "Well, I think we have what we need for now," Dale announced, closing his own notebook. He turned to Trent. "Son, why don't you come with me? We'll sort this all out down at the station. No handcuffs, no formal arrest, just a father walking his son toward the SUV, one hand firmly on Trent's shoulder. "Chief Holloway," Elijah called out. "I expect charges to be filed appropriately." Dale turned, his smile now thin. "We'll follow procedure, Judge Brooks." "You can count on that." Elijah stood by his rental car, watching as the father protected the son, as reports were softened before they were even complete, as truth was already being buried under the weight of authority and influence. The machinery was old, but it still worked perfectly. Elijah's rental car hummed quietly as he drove away from Vale Fuel and Mart, the taste of blood still sharp in his mouth. His split lip throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The police report sat on the passenger seat, a thin stack of papers that felt heavy with lies. He glanced at it and shook his head. The words on those pages weren't what happened. They were what Chief Holloway wanted to have happened. The late afternoon sun hung low as Elijah turned onto Maple Street. The First Baptist Church stood ahead, its white steeple catching the golden light. This church had been his destination all along, before Trent Holloway's fist had changed everything. He parked in the small lot beside the church and sat for a moment, gathering himself. His judicial composure had served him well at the gas station, but now, alone, he felt the weight of what had happened. Not just the punch, but the familiar dance of power protecting itself. He'd seen it too many times before. The church door opened, and Reverend Samuel Price stepped out onto the porch. At 67, the pastor moved with the steady grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. His dark eyes widened as he spotted the bruise forming on Elijah's face. "Judge Brooks," he called, hurrying down the steps. "What in heaven's name happened to you?" Elijah climbed out of the car, report in hand. "Seems I met the local welcoming committee." Inside the church office, Reverend Price sat Elijah down in a worn leather chair and pressed a cold cloth to his split lip. The room was simple but warm. Bookshelves lining the walls, a desk covered with papers, and framed photos showing decades of community gatherings. "Hold this here," the Reverend instructed, handing the cloth to Elijah. "I'm calling Ava. She needs to know about this." "She'll overreact," Elijah warned. "Sometimes overreaction is just the right amount of reaction." The Reverend picked up his phone and dialed. Ava Brooks answered on the second ring, her voice coming through the speakerphone sharp and clear. "Uncle Elijah got assaulted at a gas station," Reverend Price said without preamble. "What?" Ava's voice rose instantly. "By who? Are you okay? Do you need me to come down there?" "I'm fine," Elijah said, wincing as he pressed the cloth harder against his lip. "It's handled." "Handled?" Ava snapped. "You're sitting there bleeding, and you think it's handled? What happened exactly?" Elijah explained the encounter at the gas station. Trent's aggression, the punch, the witnesses, Monica's cameras. Then he detailed Dale Holloway's arrival and how the police report had been massaged before his eyes. "They're already burying it," Ava concluded, her attorney's mind connecting dots. "The chief's son assaults a federal judge, and they're trying to make it disappear." "Not disappear," Elijah corrected. "Reshape. Dale's too smart to deny it completely. He's just bending the narrative." "Wait," Ava paused. "Holloway? As in Sheriff Robert Holloway's son? The same Holloways from back when?" The line went silent. Reverend Price looked at Elijah with knowing eyes. "Yes," Elijah confirmed quietly. "The same family." Reverend Price took a seat across from Elijah. "You didn't tell her why you were really coming here, did you?" Elijah shook his head. "Tell me what?" Ava demanded. Elijah sighed, feeling the weight of decades. "I came to visit this church, where your grandmother, my mother, organized voting rights drives back in '86, the year before Nathan was arrested. This is about Uncle Nathan?" Ava's voice softened. Though she had never met her uncle, Nathan's story had shaped her life, driven her into civil rights law. "It's the anniversary next week," Elijah said. 30 years since he died. "I wanted to sit quietly in the pews where Mom found strength. I wasn't here as a judge. I was here as a son and a brother." Reverend Price nodded. And then another Holloway put hands on another Brooks man. "History doesn't repeat," Elijah murmured. "But sometimes it rhymes." The Reverend leaned forward. "Dale Holloway was 27 when your brother was arrested. Just a deputy then, under his father's command, but he was there when they planted that evidence in Nathan's car. He learned how to crush people from the best teacher, his daddy." Ava's sharp intake of breath carried through the speaker. "So this isn't just about some entitled punk hitting you. This is the same corrupt family power, just a generation later." "The machine keeps running," Elijah agreed. "Different hands on the controls, but the same purpose." The office fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Outside, darkness had begun to settle, turning the stained glass windows from brilliant colors to deep shadows. Elijah's phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. Monica Vale's name flashed on the cracked screen. "Ms. Vale," Elijah answered, putting the call on speaker. They came to the station," Monica's voice trembled. "After you left, the chief sent 2 officers to secure the evidence for the investigation." Her words caught on a sob. "Judge Brooks, I'm so sorry. The security server, they said they needed to take it to the station, but when they brought it back an hour later and I checked, the files are corrupted. The clearest footage from Pump 3 is just gone." Elijah pressed the phone closer to his ear as Monica's sobs filled the quiet church office. Reverend Price leaned forward, his weathered face etched with concern. On the speaker, Ava's breathing had gone still. "Take a deep breath, Ms. Vale," Elijah said, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "Tell us exactly what happened." Monica sniffled, struggling to control her voice. "After everyone left, I went to pull the footage for you. I know my system. That punch was clear as day from 3 different angles." Her voice cracked. "But when I logged in, the files were corrupted. The timestamps jump from 3:17 to 3:26, the exact minutes when Trent approached you and threw that punch." "Could it be equipment failure?" Elijah asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Monica said firmly. "The system logs show someone accessed it remotely after the police left. They knew exactly what they were doing." Ava's voice cut through the speaker. "Did they take the physical server?" "They did, for about an hour. Said they needed to secure the evidence. When they brought it back, that's when I noticed." Reverend Price shook his head. "Same old playbook." "There's more," Monica continued, her voice dropping. "Jeff Wilkins, the guy pumping gas at Station 4 who saw everything, he just texted me. Said some officers stopped by his house for a follow-up. Now he's saying he didn't see clearly and doesn't want trouble." The room fell silent. The implication hung heavy in the air. Elijah stood up. "We're coming over, Ms. Vale. Stay where you are." "I'm locked in my back office," she whispered. "I'll wait for you." 10 minutes later, Elijah's rental car pulled into Vale Fuel and Mart's empty parking lot, the closed sign already illuminated in the window. Reverend Price sat beside him, his Bible clutched in his lap, not as reading material but as a talisman of sorts, a reminder of deeper truths than what men with badges might declare. "Look there," Reverend Price nodded toward the road. A police cruiser idled across the street, headlights off, but interior dimly lit. The officer inside made no attempt to hide his surveillance. "They're not even pretending anymore," Elijah muttered. Monica met them at the side door, glancing nervously at the cruiser as she let them in. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she kept wringing her hands as she led them to her cramped office. "See for yourself," she said, turning her computer monitor toward them. The security system's playback screen showed the damning gap in footage. Before, Elijah approaching the pump. After, people gathered around while Deputy Pierce took notes. The crucial minutes between vanished. The system logs the access, Monica explained, pointing to a line of code. Someone with administrator privileges logged in at 6:42 p.m. That's well after the officers left with the server. Remote access, Elijah noted. They didn't even need to come back. Ava's voice came through the speaker of Elijah's phone. Don't touch anything else on that system, Monica. Don't try to recover files. Don't run any programs they might have installed. We need digital forensics on this. My cousin works in IT security, Monica said. But I'm afraid to call him now. What if they're monitoring my phones? Elijah pulled out his email, opening the report Deputy Pierce had sent over an hour earlier. His jaw tightened as he read, Responding to a dispute between parties at Vale Fuel and Mart. Subject A, Brooks, Elijah, and Subject B, Holloway, Trent, engaged in verbal disagreement escalating to physical contact. Subject A claims unprovoked assault, while Subject B reports defensive reaction to aggressive stance. Witnesses provide conflicting accounts of initiation. Minor injuries observed on Subject A. He passed the phone to Reverend Price, who scanned it with a grim expression. Not a single mention that Trent threw the first punch, Reverend Price noted. And look how they paint you. Aggressive stance. Like you were threatening him somehow. Just like they did with Nathan, Elijah said quietly. Rewrite history before the ink even dries. Monica sank into her chair. My son has baseball practice every Tuesday and Thursday. He walks home past the police station. Her voice trembled. This morning I was just a gas station owner. Now I'm caught between a federal judge and the police chief, and I don't know how to protect my boy. Elijah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I understand your fear, Ms. Vale. I've seen what they can do. But you stood up anyway, she said, looking at him. Because silence only feeds their power, Reverend Price added. I've buried too many dreams in this town because people were too scared to speak. Monica looked down at her hands. I want to help. I do. But they know exactly where to press to make people fold. They finished reviewing the damaged footage logs, with Ava taking detailed notes over the phone about the exact times and methods of the tampering. By the time they were done, the clock on the wall read 9:45 p.m. I should get home to my son, Monica said, gathering her purse and keys. He'll be wondering where I am. They walked her to her car, the night air heavy with humidity and tension. As Monica pulled out of the parking lot, the police cruiser across the street slowly pulled away from the curb, headlights finally clicking on as it followed at a careful distance. They're not even subtle about it, Elijah said, watching the two sets of taillights disappear down the road. They don't need to be, Reverend Price replied. Fear works better when you can see it coming. The morning light crept through the thin curtains of Reverend Price's guest room, painting warm stripes across Elijah's face. He'd slept poorly, his mind replaying the punch, Dale's calculating eyes, and Monica's fear. When the front door opened and closed with purpose downstairs, Elijah was already dressed in pressed slacks and a fresh button-down shirt, his judge's discipline unbroken despite everything. Uncle Elijah! Ava's voice carried up the stairs before her quick footsteps did. She appeared in the doorway with 3 coffee cups balanced in a cardboard tray, a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and the fierce determination that had driven her through law school against every obstacle. At 33, she had her grandmother's eyes and none of her patience. I left the city at 4, she said, handing him a cup. I wasn't about to let you face this alone. Elijah accepted the coffee with a small smile. I'm glad you're here, but I'm not in court yet. Oh, we're definitely in court, she replied, setting her laptop on the small desk by the window. The court of public opinion. Dale Holloway's already made sure of that. She pulled up a local radio station's website and hit play on the morning segment. And we have to ask ourselves what a federal judge was really doing at a small-town gas station, the host was saying, with exaggerated concern. Sources close to the situation tell me Judge Brooks has a history of making certain accusations when confronted. Our local boy, Trent Holloway, comes from 3 generations of law enforcement. Are we really supposed to believe? Ava clicked it off. It gets worse. Check the comments. Elijah leaned over her shoulder, scanning the posts below the station's social media update. Who does this judge think he is coming to our town stirring trouble? My cousin says Brooks was rude first, and Trent just defended himself. Always the same story. Play the race card when you don't get your way. How convenient no video exists, almost like the story's made up. Reverend Price entered, accepting the 3rd coffee cup. Started before dawn, he said grimly. Dale's not waiting around. Good, Ava said, closing the laptop. Neither are we. We proceed carefully, Elijah cautioned. If we react exactly as Dale expects, we'll walk right into whatever he's prepared. And if we do nothing, Ava countered, he'll bury the truth so deep no one will remember it existed. Reverend Price nodded toward the window. Best place to start is back where it happened. Monica needs to know she's not alone. 20 minutes later, they pulled into Vale Fuel and Mart, the morning sun already hot against the pavement. The station looked normal at first glance, pumps working, a few cars fueling up, the convenience store open. But something was wrong. Through the glass storefront, they could see Monica gesturing with visible distress to a man in a county uniform holding a clipboard. Health inspector, Ava muttered as they walked in. Funny timing. Inside, the inspector was pointing at a shelf near the coffee station. Improper distance from heating elements, he was saying, marking his form. And these cooler temperatures are running 2 degrees above standard. That's a separate violation. Monica spotted them, and her eyes widened briefly before she composed herself. The cooler was serviced last month, she said, her voice strained but polite. It's never been flagged before. Standards change, the inspector replied without looking up. And this floor drain needs immediate attention. Potential contamination risk. Elijah approached casually, as if he were a regular customer getting morning coffee. Monica gave him a quick warning glance. Excuse me, Elijah said to the inspector. Is there a particular reason for an unscheduled inspection this morning? The man glanced up, recognizing Elijah immediately. His expression flickered between discomfort and rehearsed indifference. Random compliance check, he said flatly. County policy. I see, Elijah replied, making no move to identify himself as a judge. And how many other businesses received random inspections this particular morning? The inspector's jaw tightened. I don't set the schedule, sir. Ava had taken position near the counter, quietly photographing each citation with her phone while pretending to check messages. Reverend Price stood by the door, a silent witness. Of course, Elijah nodded. I'm sure you're just doing your job. Something in his tone made the inspector pause, as if suddenly realizing he might be creating evidence rather than simply following orders. He hurriedly finished his list, handed Monica a citation sheet with 6 violations, and headed for the door. You have 48 hours to address these issues before re-inspection, he mumbled. When he was gone, Monica's professional smile collapsed. Her hands trembled as she set the citation sheet on the counter. 4 years I've run this place, she whispered. Never had more than 1 minor violation. Now, suddenly, I have 6 that could shut me down. Elijah looked at the paper. This isn't about health code. This is about making you regret helping me. I know, she said. But knowing doesn't fix my cooler or pay the fines. We'll help with both, Elijah assured her, not as a powerful judge, but as a human being who understood what it meant to stand against pressure. You're not alone in this. Monica's eyes softened briefly before alarm flashed across her face. She was looking past Elijah, out the window. Jackson, she breathed. They turned to see a teenage boy with Monica's eyes walking along the edge of the parking lot, backpack slung over one shoulder. Across the street, a police cruiser had pulled to the curb. The officer inside wasn't doing anything, just watching the boy walk, making his presence known. Monica's fear transformed into something deeper and colder. The citations and inspections were business. This was her child. That's my son, she said, her voice barely audible. That's my baby they're watching. Elijah steered the rental car away from Vale Fuel and Mart, with Ava beside him in the passenger seat. Neither spoke for a few blocks. The sight of Monica's son being watched had turned abstract threats into something real and immediate. "They're not even hiding it," Ava finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They're showing her exactly what they can do." Elijah nodded, his hand steady on the wheel despite the burning feeling in his chest. It's meant to be seen. That's how intimidation works. The late morning sun beat down on the windshield as they drove through the quiet streets toward Reverend Price's church. The neighborhood seemed peaceful, American flags on porches, sprinklers turning on front lawns, but Elijah now understood this calm was built on silent rules about who could speak and who couldn't. They pulled into the small parking lot beside the church annex, a modest brick building with narrow windows and a side entrance. Reverend Price had offered them the conference room as a temporary headquarters. "We need to understand what we're really fighting," Elijah said as they gathered their laptops and files from the car. "This isn't just about one punch anymore." "It never was," Ava replied. Inside, Reverend Price had already set up the space with a long table, extra chairs, and a coffee maker humming in the corner. Maps of the county covered one wall, not for this case, but from his decades of community organizing. "How's Monica?" he asked as they entered. "Scared," Elijah said, "but standing strong." "They're watching her son," Ava added, setting her laptop on the table with more force than necessary. "Plain as day." The Reverend's face tightened. "Hasn't changed in 40 years, he said. "Just got cleaner around the edges." Ava opened her laptop and began pulling up files. "I've been digging into Trent's history since last night. Public records, news mentions, court filings, anything I could find." She turned the screen so they could see. "Most of what happens gets buried, but not everything. Some things leave traces." Elijah leaned in, studying the spreadsheet she'd created. Incidents were organized by date, with color coding for severity and outcome. Even with quick glances, the pattern was obvious. Bar fight 2020, charges dropped after witnesses suddenly couldn't remember details, Ava pointed. Harassment complaint from a woman who worked at the movie theater 2021, case marked inactive after she left town. Road rage where Trent allegedly ran someone off Route 16, dashcam footage corrupted during evidence transfer. "How many?" Elijah asked quietly. 11 incidents I can find some record of, Ava said. "And those are just the ones where something got filed before it disappeared." Reverend Price nodded slowly. "Matches what I've been hearing for years. That boy's been terrorizing people since high school, and his daddy always cleans it up." He walked to a filing cabinet in the corner and pulled out an old church directory. "It's not just Trent, either. The Holloways have been running this system since Dale's father was chief." He flipped through yellowed pages, pointing to families. The Washingtons had their business licenses mysteriously denied after their son argued with a Holloway cousin. The Johnsons had constant traffic stops until they moved away. The Taylors found their mail tampered with after filing a complaint about response times in their neighborhood. Elijah's stomach tightened. Same playbook they used on Nathan. "Same book, different chapter," the Reverend agreed. Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her eyebrows rising. "It's from Deputy Pierce. Says he needs to meet, privately." They exchanged looks. This could be their first break inside the department itself. Ava was typing a response when another message came through. She frowned. "He's canceling. Says he made a mistake." "He's scared," Elijah said. "But the fact he reached out at all tells us something important." "What's that?" Reverend Price asked. "That the conscience inside that department isn't completely dead," Elijah replied. "Fear and guilt don't live in the same place. If Pierce feels guilty enough to reach out, others might too." Ava nodded, adding another note to her growing document. "This isn't just about Trent hitting you anymore. It's about breaking open the whole system." "It always was," Reverend Price said quietly. "Your brother knew that 30 years ago." Elijah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful street. How many other stories had been buried under this town's quiet surface? How many people had learned to live with fear as a silent neighbor? "We need more evidence," he said. "Something they can't make disappear." Just after noon, Ava's phone rang. She answered, putting it on speaker. "This is Ava Brooks." "Ma'am, this is Roy Jenkins." A man's voice came through, road noise rumbling in the background. "I was at that gas station yesterday. The truck driver who saw what happened." Elijah moved closer to the phone. "I'm on my way to Arkansas now, but I wanted to tell you. I checked my dash cam. I keep it running even when I'm parked sometimes." The man's voice sounded nervous but determined. "It was angled right at those pumps. I think I got the whole thing, including before that Holloway kid threw the punch." Ava's eyes met Elijah's, a spark of hope kindling between them. "Mr. Jenkins," she said carefully, "are you saying you have video evidence of the assault?" "Yes, ma'am. And I'm saying I'm willing to share it, no matter who gets mad. Nobody deserves to get treated like that judge did." The first real crack in the Holloway wall had just appeared. The church parking lot shimmered under the afternoon sun. Elijah stood with Ava and Reverend Price, all three squinting against the glare as a semi-truck rumbled to a stop just outside the lot. The driver, Roy Jenkins, climbed down from the cab. He was a stocky man with weathered skin and careful eyes, dressed in jeans and a faded blue work shirt. "Judge Brooks?" he asked, approaching with a small thumb drive in his hand. Elijah stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming." The truck driver glanced around nervously. "I can't stay long. Got a schedule to keep, and honestly, I don't want trouble." He handed the thumb drive to Elijah. "But what happened wasn't right. My daddy raised me better than to walk away from something like that." Ava moved closer. "This is the dash cam footage?" Jenkins nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Caught most of it. My truck was parked at the diesel pump, angled toward you all. Quality's not perfect, but you can see plenty." "Did anyone contact you after you left yesterday?" Elijah asked. "Got a call this morning from someone claiming to be doing follow-up for the sheriff's department. Asked if I was planning to file a formal witness statement." Jenkins shook his head. The way he asked made it clear what answer they wanted. Reverend Price's face darkened. "Same old tactics." "I told them I didn't see much," Jenkins admitted. "Figured I'd rather help directly than get tied up in their games." "You're doing the right thing," Elijah said, pocketing the drive. Jenkins glanced at his watch. "I need to get back on the road." "Arkansas doesn't wait." They thanked him, and Jenkins climbed back into his truck. The diesel engine roared to life, and within moments he was gone, leaving only dust and hope behind. Inside the church office, Ava plugged the thumb drive into her laptop. The three gathered around the screen as the video began to play. The footage showed the gas station from an angle capturing Pump 3 clearly. They watched Trent approach Elijah, his body language aggressive. Though the audio was faint, they could hear Trent's mocking tone. The camera caught the moment Trent deliberately blocked Elijah's path, knocked the phone from his hand, and then grabbed Elijah's jacket. "There," Ava said, freezing the frame. "He's clearly the aggressor. This contradicts everything in Dale's report." Elijah leaned closer. "The report claimed I moved toward him first. This shows the opposite." "God's truth in digital form," Reverend Price murmured. Just then, Ava's phone buzzed. She checked the message, her eyes widening. "It's about Monica's security system. The vendor says their equipment has an automatic cloud backup feature. Even if the local files were deleted, there might be fragments stored remotely." "Can they recover it?" Elijah asked. "They're trying now." "I pushed for emergency priority." Ava's fingers flew over her phone keyboard. "If we get both video sources plus Jenkins' testimony, we might finally have enough," Elijah finished. Reverend Price watched them with cautious eyes. "This is good news, but remember who we're dealing with. The Holloways have escaped consequences for decades." "Not this time," Ava said firmly. "The evidence is starting to line up." Elijah's phone rang. It was Monica. "I heard from your niece about the cloud backup," she said, her voice steadier than the day before. "If you get that footage and the truck driver's video, I'll testify. I'll tell everything I saw." "Are you sure?" Elijah asked. "There will be pressure. I'm making arrangements for my son to stay with my sister in Atlanta for a while," Monica replied. "Once he's safe, I'm ready to stand up. This has gone on too long." After ending the call, Elijah shared Monica's decision with the others. "The wall is starting to crack," Ava said, hope evident in her voice. For the first time since the assault, Elijah allowed himself a careful breath. The fear and intimidation tactics that had worked for the Holloways for so long might finally be failing. "Let's not celebrate yet," Reverend Price warned. "Men like Dale Holloway become most dangerous when they feel control slipping away." "We need to move carefully," Elijah agreed, "but we also need to move quickly." They spent the next hour formulating strategy, mapping out next steps and legal approaches. The church office became a war room of sorts, with Ava drafting documents while Elijah made calls to trusted colleagues. As late afternoon approached, Elijah stepped outside for fresh air. The church steps offered a moment of quiet reflection. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the parking lot. He heard footsteps on the pavement before he saw who was approaching. Chief Dale Holloway walked toward him with measured steps, alone and in uniform. Dale stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at Elijah. His face was composed, but his eyes held cold calculation. "Judge Brooks," he said, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the still air. "I thought we might have a word, man to man." Elijah didn't move from his position. "Chief Holloway." "You know," Dale said, keeping his voice low, "this town has a way of sorting things out internally. Outsiders who come stirring up old business rarely find what they're looking for. I'm not an outsider, Chief. My family's roots go deeper here than yours." Dale's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Be that as it may, I'm concerned about the direction this is heading. My son made a mistake. Boys do that. But turning one hot-headed moment into some kind of crusade won't help anyone." "Is that what you called it 30 years ago? A mistake?" Elijah's voice remained steady. "When your department destroyed my brother's life?" "Ancient history," Dale said dismissively, "and not relevant to the present situation. Justice doesn't have an expiration date." Dale stepped closer, one foot on the bottom step. "Judge, you've built a fine career. It would be a shame to see it tarnished by a personal vendetta that makes you look less than impartial." Elijah met Dale's gaze without flinching. "Is that a threat, Chief Holloway?" "Just a friendly observation between public servants." "Then let me offer one in return," Elijah said, his voice calm but firm. "I will not be intimidated. Not by you, not by your son, not by your deputies or your friends in local media. The truth has waited long enough to be heard in this town." Elijah pushed open the church office door, his face set in stone. Ava and Monica looked up immediately, and Reverend Price turned from the window where he'd been watching Dale's departure. "What did he want?" Ava asked, already on her feet. "To remind me of my place," Elijah said. His voice was steady, but anger flickered behind his eyes. "And to suggest that pursuing this further would be unwise." Monica wrapped her arms around herself. "What did you tell him?" "That I will not be intimidated." Elijah moved to the desk and placed his hands flat on its surface. "And neither should any of you." Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and raised her finger. "It's the vendor." "Hello?" "Yes, this is Ava Brooks." She listened intently, pacing as she took notes. The others waited, barely breathing. After 2 minutes, she ended the call with a fierce smile. They found it. The system had an automatic backup feature that uploaded to their cloud storage every 6 hours. The last sync happened before the deletion. "What exactly do we have?" Elijah asked. "Fragments, not the entire footage, but enough." Ava's eyes gleamed. "Including the moment Trent grabbed you and threw the first punch." Relief washed over Monica's face. "So they can't hide it anymore." "Not this time." Ava began typing rapidly on her laptop. "I'm sending this to colleagues at the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Informally, for now. Elijah nodded. Good. We need to move carefully but decisively. Monica straightened her shoulders. I want to sign my witness statement. Right now, while we have momentum. Reverend Price smiled gently. That takes courage, Monica. My son deserves to see his mother stand up for what's right, she said, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the papers Ava had prepared. As she signed, Ava's phone buzzed again with a text message. She read it and looked up in surprise. It's Pierce. He wants to talk. Says he can't keep doing this. The conscience awakens, Reverend Price murmured. For the next hour, the office witnessed, both at the gas station and the intimidation afterward. Elijah reviewed the recovered footage on Ava's laptop, his expression growing more resolved with each viewing. This is more than just one assault, Elijah said finally, leaning back in his chair. This is about breaking a system that's crushed too many people for too long. Monica nodded. People have been afraid to cross the Holloways for years. My father warned me never to make waves when I took over the station. Nathan never got his justice, Elijah continued, his voice softening as he mentioned his brother. But this time, we have evidence they can't bury. Technology they couldn't anticipate. Witnesses brave enough to speak. Ava closed her laptop. We'll file first thing tomorrow. The formal complaint is ready. The moment felt weightless, a breath of victory after days of pressure. Even Reverend Price allowed himself a smile, though wisdom kept his celebration tempered. At 9:47 p.m., Monica's phone rang. She answered, listened, and the color drained from her face. The station alarm, she whispered. Something's triggered the fire alert. They moved as one, grabbing coats and keys. Elijah drove with Monica in the passenger seat, her fingers digging into her thighs. Ava and Reverend Price followed in her car. They could see the glow 3 blocks away. Orange light pulsed against the night sky. As they turned the corner, Vale Fuel and Mart came into view, smoke billowing from the side office. 2 fire trucks were already there, hoses snaking across the pavement. The gas pumps remained untouched, but the convenience store section and office were enveloped in smoke. Monica made a sound like she'd been struck. She was out of the car before Elijah fully stopped. A firefighter intercepted her. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." "It's my store," she cried, struggling against his arm. "Everything I have is in there." Elijah joined her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Is anyone hurt?" "No injuries," the firefighter confirmed. "We've got it contained to the office and storage area, but there's significant damage." They stood in helpless witness as the firefighters battled the blaze. After 30 minutes, the flames retreated, leaving behind acrid smoke and the hiss of water on hot surfaces. The chief allowed Monica to view the damage from a safe distance. The office was destroyed. Computer equipment melted into unrecognizable shapes. Filing cabinets warped and blackened. Inventory from the adjacent storeroom charred beyond salvation. Monica's legs gave way. Reverend Price caught her before she hit the ground. Ava's phone rang again. Her expression darkened as she listened. When she hung up, her hands were shaking with rage. "Pierce was found beaten in the parking lot behind the courthouse. He's in the hospital claiming he was robbed, but my contact says his injuries look targeted. Broken fingers, facial trauma." "Jesus," Reverend Price whispered. Elijah's phone chimed with an email alert. He read it silently, his face hardening with each line. "An ethics complaint," he said finally, "filed anonymously with the Judicial Review Board, claiming I've used my position to improperly influence local proceedings and intimidate law enforcement." The counterattack had been swift, brutal, and comprehensive. Near midnight, they stood in Monica's ruined office. Firefighters had declared the scene safe enough to enter briefly. Water dripped from the ceiling, pooling on the blackened floor. The smell of smoke clung to everything. Elijah picked up a piece of melted shelving, turning it in his hands. In the harsh emergency lighting, his face looked carved from granite. He had maintained his composure through the confrontation with Dale, through the hope of the recovered footage, through the ethics complaint. But here, surrounded by destruction meant to silence truth, something broke loose inside him. The restraint that had defined his career, his very nature, cracked open. "They think this ends it," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They think this is how power works. Burn what you can't control, hurt who you can't buy, threaten what you can't face." He dropped the shelving with a hollow clatter. The Holloways had chosen total war, not understanding they had just freed him from his last hesitation. The fire crew's radios crackled in the midnight darkness as they packed away hoses and equipment. Monica sat on the tailgate of Reverend Price's car, a scratchy emergency blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes never left the blackened doorway of what had been her office. "Insurance will cover the structure," she whispered, voice hollow. "But not everything. Not what this really costs." Elijah stood inside the ruined space, his polished shoes soaking in puddles of chemical-laced water. Soot stained his cuffs and fingertips. The air tasted of ash and plastic. Where file cabinets once stood, only warped metal skeletons remained. The computer that held backup footage was a melted lump. "Arson," said the fire captain, stepping carefully through the debris. "Someone broke the back window, poured accelerant around the office, and lit it up. Targeted the areas with equipment and records." Monica pulled the blanket tighter. "They're sending a message." "To all of us," Ava said, ending another call. Her face was hard in the emergency lights. "My contact at the hospital says Pierce won't talk. He's sticking to the robbery story, but his injuries are specific. Broken fingers, facial trauma aimed to make identification difficult. They wanted him silenced, not just hurt." Elijah wiped black residue from a half-burned calendar on the wall. "Dale moves quickly." "This isn't a setback," Ava insisted, her voice rising with controlled fury. "It's evidence. We need to connect everything. The assault, the witness intimidation, now arson, and likely assault on Pierce, before Dale can split them into separate, deniable incidents." Monica stood suddenly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "What about my son? The fire?" Her voice cracked. "If they'll burn my business as a warning, what message might they send him next?" Reverend Price put an arm around her. "You're both coming to stay at the church tonight. We'll figure out protection tomorrow." The fire captain approached with clipboard in hand. "We'll file the report as suspected arson. Investigation will start in the morning." "Under whose authority?" Elijah asked quietly. The captain hesitated. "County Fire Marshal works with local law enforcement on these cases." "With Chief Holloway," Elijah translated. "Yes, sir." Ava took photos of everything. The broken window, the burn patterns, the destroyed equipment. Evidence that might never make an official report. "We need to go," Reverend Price said, as the last fire truck prepared to leave. "Nothing more to see tonight that helps anybody." The drive back to the church passed in heavy silence. Monica had gone to collect her son, planning to meet them there. Elijah stared out the window at the sleeping town, wondering how many other buried stories lay beneath its orderly surface. In the church annex, Ava had transformed a corner into a makeshift command center. Laptop, legal pads, coffee cups, and printouts scattered across a folding table. She didn't look up when they entered. "I've been digging deeper," she said, fingers flying across the keyboard. "The pattern didn't start with Trent. I've been cross-referencing old county records with what Reverend Price remembered." She swiveled the screen toward them. "These are intake documents from Nathan's arrest 30 years ago. Look at the processing officer's signature." Elijah leaned closer, his breath catching. "D. Holloway. Dale was just a junior officer then," Reverend Price confirmed. "Working under his father." Ava pulled out more documents. "I found discrepancies, missing pages in the arrest record, witness statements that were logged but never filed, dates altered on key documents." Elijah sank into a chair, taking the yellowed papers with trembling hands. "Nathan told us they threatened witnesses, changed statements. We couldn't prove it. Someone removed evidence from his case," Ava said, her voice gentle but firm. "And that someone appears to be Dale Holloway." The realization hit Elijah like a physical blow. Not just that Dale protected his violent son, but that the same man might have helped destroy Elijah's brother decades ago. The circle closed with crushing weight. Nathan never recovered, Elijah whispered, tracing his brother's signature on an old statement form. Lost his job, his home. His health started failing within 2 years, all because he refused to be humiliated during that traffic stop. Reverend Price placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. Truth hurts when it resurfaces. That's because it was buried violently in the first place. Elijah spread the documents across the table. Nathan's case from 30 years ago, the twisted police report from the gas station, photos of Monica's burned office. He saw not separate incidents, but a continuous pattern of power protecting itself across generations. They took Nathan's dignity, he said, voice growing stronger. Then his future, then his life. And nothing changed. The same family is still hurting people the same way. The church bells chimed twice in the distance, 2 in the morning, and Elijah felt more awake than he had in years. He wiped soot from Nathan's file with his handkerchief, a gentle gesture of respect. I've been approaching this like a judge, he said finally. Defensive, measured, waiting for proper process. He looked up at Ava and Reverend Price, his eyes clear and resolved. That ends now. He stood, straightening papers with steady hands. I'm done defending myself against their lies. From this moment, we're prosecuting the entire pattern. Everything they've done. To me, to Nathan, to Monica, to everyone who ever stood in their way. Reverend Price nodded slowly. They chose this fight, thinking they were punching down. They were wrong, Elijah said, voice quiet but unyielding. And I'm going to make sure the whole town sees it. Morning light leaked through the hospital windows, casting pale rectangles across Deputy Nolan Pierce's bruised face. His eyes darted nervously to the door every few seconds, as if expecting someone to burst in. Elijah, Ava, and Reverend Price had arrived at 7 o'clock, before the regular visiting hours, thanks to Ava's legal credentials and a sympathetic night nurse. I told you everything already, Pierce said, voice barely above a whisper. It was a robbery. Wrong place, wrong time. Elijah took the chair closest to the bed, noting the swelling around Pierce's eye, the split lip, the defensive bruises on his forearms. Not random marks. These were calculated blows meant to hurt, but not permanently damage. Deputy Pierce, Elijah said, his voice calm and direct, I'm not here to threaten you or demand anything. Pierce looked away. I've got nothing to say, Judge. Then just listen. Elijah leaned forward slightly. My brother Nathan was arrested in this county 30 years ago. False charges. His life fell apart after that. He lost his job, then his health. 2 years later, he was dead. Pierce swallowed hard, but remained silent. You know what the hardest part was? Elijah continued. Not the arrest. Not even watching him struggle after. It was the silence. Every person who knew the truth, but said nothing. Every officer who looked away. They didn't throw a single punch, but their silence was violence all the same. Reverend Price stood by the window, his presence steady. Ava remained near the door, watching the hallway while listening intently. Nathan died because good people were too afraid to speak, Elijah said. And last night, someone tried to burn down a woman's livelihood because she told the truth about what she saw. Pierce's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink back. I don't need you to be brave, Elijah said. I just need you to understand what silence costs. Something cracked in Pierce's face. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It wasn't a robbery, he finally whispered. 2 officers I've known for years caught me behind the station after my shift. Said the chief was concerned about my loyalty. He lowered his hands, revealing naked fear. One held me while the other worked me over. Said next time they'd make sure I couldn't work again. Ava moved closer, recorder already in hand. Why did they target you specifically? Pierce looked at her, then back to Elijah. Because I told another deputy I was thinking about coming clean about the gas station report. How the chief made me change things before filing. What exactly did he make you change? Elijah asked. Everything that mattered. My first draft said Trent clearly initiated physical contact. That witnesses confirmed you didn't provoke him. That the station owner reported Trent threw the first punch. Pierce's words rushed out now. Dale made me rewrite it. Made me use words like mutual altercation and unclear who initiated. I knew it was wrong. And you have proof of this? Ava asked carefully. Pierce nodded slowly. After what happened with the security footage at the gas station, I got scared. The next time Dale called me in to discuss cleaning up witness statements, I wore a body recorder. The room went silent. Elijah exchanged a glance with Ava. He doesn't confess outright, Pierce continued, reaching for a small bag beside his bed. But he talks about how to manage witnesses, how to protect the department's interests, how Trent needs to be insulated from consequences. He pulled out a small digital recorder and handed it to Ava with trembling fingers. And the old files? Elijah asked quietly. Nathan Brooks? Pierce's eyes dropped. Dale had me help reorganize archived files 3 years ago when the department went digital. Certain cases got special attention. Pages removed. Notes rewritten. Your brother's was one of them. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I knew it was wrong. But I needed this job. Ava connected the recorder to her laptop, confirming the files were intact before making immediate backups. You're doing the right thing, Reverend Price said, speaking for the first time. Pierce looked up, tears streaming freely now. They're going to destroy me for this. No, Elijah said firmly. They've already tried that. Now you're taking your power back. As Ava finished securing the evidence, Pierce seemed to physically lighten, as if setting down a weight he'd carried for years. His fear remained, but alongside it now was something else. Relief. I should have spoken up years ago, he said. Elijah nodded. Today is enough. They left Pierce's room 40 minutes later, Ava's laptop containing the audio that could finally crack Dale Holloway's careful facade. In the elevator down to the lobby, Reverend Price squeezed Elijah's shoulder. You reached him where threats never could. Elijah nodded, feeling steadier than he had since the assault. Truth has its own gravity. The morning sun hit them as they crossed the parking lot toward Reverend Price's car. Ava was already making calls to secure the evidence when her phone rang. Her expression shifted as she listened. It's Monica, she said, covering the receiver. She sounds terrified. Elijah and Reverend Price stopped walking. Ava put the phone on speaker. He's here, Monica whispered, her voice shaking. Trent Holloway just pulled up outside the station. He's demanding I come out and talk to him. Are you alone? Elijah asked immediately. Yes, my son's at school. I'm in the back office. The front is still boarded up from the fire. They could hear Trent shouting in the background, his words muffled but tone unmistakable. He says, if I don't stop talking, things will get worse. That his father can't protect him if I keep lying about what happened. Monica's breath came in short gasps. What do I do? We're coming right now, Ava said firmly. Stay inside. Doors locked. I'm calling 911. As they rushed toward the car, Elijah's mind raced. Trent showing up at the burned station wasn't just intimidation. It was desperation. The Holloways were starting to fracture under pressure, and a cornered animal was always the most dangerous. Elijah gripped the dashboard as Reverend Price pushed his aging sedan well beyond his usual careful pace. The hospital fell away behind them as they sped toward Vale Fuel and Mart, where Monica faced Trent alone. Take Route 16, Ava directed from the back seat, still on the phone. Monica, stay on the line with me. Are you locked in the office? Monica's voice crackled through the speaker. Yes, but he keeps pounding on the door. He sounds different. Worse than at the gas pump. Elijah checked his watch. 12 minutes since Monica's call. Every second stretched like an hour. The temporary cameras are still running, right? Ava asked. Yes, Monica whispered. Tom from the hardware store set them up last night after the fire. They point right at the front lot. Reverend Price took a sharp turn, and Vale Fuel and Mart came into view. The store stood wounded, plywood covering blown-out windows, black smoke stains climbing the white walls like grasping fingers. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze, and there was Trent, pacing beside his gleaming truck, kicking at debris, his movements jerky and unpredictable. "Stay in the car until we assess," Elijah said to Ava, who nodded and kept recording on her phone. As Reverend Price parked, they spotted Monica emerging from the back entrance, clutching her phone. Trent whirled toward her, his face flushed and sweaty. "There she is," Trent shouted, pointing dramatically. "The liar who's trying to ruin my life." Elijah stepped out, moving with deliberate calm. Trent's appearance shocked him. The polished young man from the gas station was gone. This version had bloodshot eyes, rumpled clothes, and that particular recklessness that comes from fear mixed with entitlement. "You need to leave, Mr. Holloway," Elijah called firmly. Trent spun toward Elijah's voice, nearly losing his balance. "You," he spat. "This is all your fault. You could have just taken the hit like a man and driven away." Monica edged around toward Reverend Price, who positioned himself protectively beside her. "Nothing is Monica's fault, or my fault," Elijah replied evenly. "You assaulted me at that pump. That was your choice." Trent laughed, a bitter sound with no humor. "Choice? This was supposed to disappear like everything else. Dad always fixes it." "That's how it works." Ava had emerged from the car, phone held steady, capturing every damning word. "Like what else, Trent?" she asked. "What other things has your father fixed?" Trent's gaze darted between them, not noticing, or caring, that Ava was recording. "Everything. The fight at Drummer's Bar, that stupid kid who claimed I ran him off the road, the girl who said I grabbed her at the county fair." His voice rose with each confession. "Dad makes the problems go away. That's what the badge is for." A small crowd of cleanup workers and neighboring business owners had stopped to watch the spectacle. Several had phones raised. "Your father can't make this disappear," Elijah said. "Too many witnesses. Too much evidence." Trent's face contorted. "You outsiders will leave, but we'll still be here with all these people." He gestured wildly toward Monica. "She needs to understand that." "Are you threatening her?" Reverend Price asked, his deep voice carrying across the lot. "I'm explaining reality," Trent shouted, kicking a fallen piece of charred wood. "Federal people show up, make noise, then vanish. But my family has run this county for 40 years. Monica stepped forward, trembling but determined. "My store burned down, Trent. My life's work. Was that your reality check, too?" Trent's expression flickered between rage and panic. That wasn't—" He stopped, realizing how many people were watching. "What did your father tell you to do?" Elijah asked quietly. "Stay away from all of you," Trent admitted, his voice cracking. "But I can't sleep. I can't think. You're ruining my whole life over one stupid mistake." "Assault isn't a mistake," Ava said coldly. "Neither is witness intimidation or destroying evidence." Something snapped behind Trent's eyes. He grabbed a sawhorses supporting the caution tape and hurled it aside. "You think you're so much better than me?" he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You think those fancy degrees and federal badges mean anything here? My father will bury all of you. He'll make you wish you never set foot in this town." In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder. Trent's head snapped toward the sound, his face drained of color. "Who called them?" "I did," Monica said, "before you arrived." Trent lunged toward her, but Elijah stepped between them. "Don't make it worse," Elijah warned. "Worse?" Trent laughed wildly. "It can't get worse." He backed toward his truck, pointing at each of them in turn. "You're dead in this town, all of you. When this is over, you'll see what happens to people who cross the Holloways." The sirens rounded the corner, 2 patrol cars speeding toward the lot. Trent scrambled into his truck, engine roaring to life. Tires squealed as he reversed, nearly hitting a dumpster, then accelerated onto the street, running a stop sign as he fled. The patrol cars split, one continuing toward Vale Fuel and Mart, the other pursuing Trent's truck. "I got it all," Ava said, lowering her phone. "Every threat, every admission." Monica's legs gave out, and Reverend Price guided her to a bench. "He would have hurt me," she whispered. "I saw it in his eyes." Elijah knelt beside her, but he didn't. And now, everyone else saw what we've been dealing with. Around them, phones lowered as people exchanged shocked glances. The carefully maintained illusion of Holloway respectability had just shattered in broad daylight. The remaining patrol car pulled up, and Deputy Carson, not one of Dale's inner circle, stepped out, looking grim. "I'm going to need statements from everyone," he said. "And I understand there's video?" Ava nodded. "Multiple angles. The chief's son just threatened witnesses in a federal case." For the first time since the assault at the pump, Elijah felt the momentum shift. Dale Holloway had maintained power through fear and silence. But Trent had just made sure the whole town was talking. The municipal building's meeting room strained under the weight of bodies. People lined the walls, filled every seat, and clustered near doorways where air conditioning fought the rising heat of too many bodies in too small a space. Camera phones raised like periscopes from the crowd. Local reporters clutched notepads. Uniformed officers stood at rigid attention along the back wall, faces carved from stone. Monica squeezed her son's shoulder as they sat beside Elijah. The teenager had insisted on coming, refusing to hide anymore. Reverend Price nodded to parishioners scattered throughout the crowd. Ava arranged documents with military precision, her movements quick and certain. Deputy Pierce sat with them, too. A butterfly bandage across his eyebrow, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes. His hands trembled slightly, but his jaw was set. "Never seen it this packed," a woman whispered behind them. "Not even during the flood council." The town council members looked overwhelmed, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to each other. The mayor, a thin man with perpetually worried eyes, tapped his gavel with little conviction. "We'll begin this emergency session regarding the incidents at Vale Fuel and Mart," he announced, voice wavering. The side door swung open. Chief Dale Holloway entered, spine straight, uniform pressed to perfection. Only the thin sheen of sweat at his temples and collar betrayed any tension. He nodded to council members as if this were a routine budget meeting. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Dale took his seat at the front table, arranging his hat beside a folder. "Where's Junior?" someone muttered, loud enough to carry. As if on cue, the main doors opened. Trent slouched in beside a silver-haired attorney in an expensive suit. Trent's eyes were bloodshot, his normally styled hair limp. He couldn't meet anyone's gaze. "That's them," Monica's son whispered. "The ones who've been scaring everybody." The mayor cleared his throat. "Chief Holloway has asked to address recent allegations before we hear from other parties." His voice filled the room, deep and controlled. "What we have here is unfortunate on many levels. An altercation has been twisted into political theater by outside interests. My son admits to losing his temper during a misunderstanding, but this escalation serves agendas that have nothing to do with justice." He gestured toward Elijah's group. "Federal attention, media manipulation, old grudges being revived, all while actual facts get buried. This department has served this community with distinction for generations. I would ask everyone to consider who benefits from tearing down institutions over isolated incidents." Ava stood before he finished. "Mr. Mayor, may I respond directly? Since the chief mentions facts being buried, we should discuss exactly what's been buried and by whom." The mayor nodded nervously. Dale's jaw tightened as Ava approached the front with a laptop and folder. "Facts aren't opinions," Ava began, connecting her computer to the projector. "They're documented evidence, like this dashcam footage showing Trent Holloway initiating physical aggression against Judge Brooks. The screen filled with clear video of Trent approaching Elijah, knocking away his phone, grabbing him, and throwing the punch." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dale's face remained impassive. Or these recovered security fragments from Vale Fuel and Mart, Ava continued, switching files, showing the same assault from another angle before the system was mysteriously accessed and key footage deleted. Monica leaned forward. My security vendor recovered these from cloud backup after someone tampered with my system. Ava nodded. We also have this audio recording from Deputy Pierce's body mic during a conversation with Chief Holloway. Pierce stared at his hands as his voice played through speakers. Sir, the report doesn't match what witnesses described. Dale's voice followed. Reports reflect what matters, not what people think they saw. This needs handling like the others. Clean it up. Secure the footage. Talk to witnesses before outside statements solidify. You know the drill. Dale's face darkened as his own words filled the room. Ava continued relentlessly. The fire investigators' preliminary report indicates suspicious access to Vale Fuel and Mart's electrical system before the fire began. And we've uncovered altered files from 30 years ago showing the same pattern of evidence tampering in the false arrest of Nathan Brooks, Judge Brooks's brother. Reverend Price stood next. His voice carried weight, earned through decades of respect. I've watched this family abuse power for 40 years, he said. I've buried good people broken by their system. I've comforted families forced to leave town after standing up to them. Nathan Brooks was just one name among dozens. He listed them. Names, dates, incidents. A litany of buried injustices that had shaped the town's silent fear. When Elijah finally rose, the room fell completely still. He didn't approach the podium. He simply stood where he was, voice measured, but carrying to every corner. I came to this town to honor my mother's memory at the church where she once found hope, he said. I wasn't wearing robes or announcing titles. I was simply a man filling his car with gas. Your chief's son decided I didn't belong here and responded with violence. When that failed, his father deployed the same system that destroyed my brother's life decades ago. Elijah's calm made his words more devastating than any shout could be. This isn't about one punch or one fire. It's about power that answers questions with fear. It's about a badge used to shield bullies instead of protect citizens. It's about a town held hostage by a family that believes rules apply to everyone except them. Trent's face crumpled. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Trent shook him off and stood. It's all true, he blurted, voice breaking. Dad always said nobody could touch us. He taught me how it works, who to scare, who to pay off, how to make problems disappear. Sit down, Dale hissed, half rising. No, Trent shouted, tears streaming down his face. You said you'd fix it like always, but you can't fix this. You said nobody would believe them over us, but everyone sees it now. Dale lunged toward his son, but froze as the main doors swung open. 4 men and women in dark suits entered, flanked by uniformed federal agents. The lead agent held up credentials. Chief Dale Holloway, we have warrants for your arrest on multiple federal charges including civil rights violations, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. Trent Holloway, we have warrants for your arrest on charges of assault, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. The room erupted. People leapt to their feet. Phones recorded frantically. Officers along the wall looked at each other in confusion and alarm. This is my department, Dale shouted as agents approached. This is my town! But his words were swallowed by the chaos as the shield he'd hidden behind for decades finally shattered in public view. Dale Holloway stumbled as federal agents guided him down the municipal building steps in handcuffs. His face flushed deep crimson, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The badge that had been his shield for decades was already gone, removed by the lead agent minutes earlier inside. This is a mistake, he growled, but his voice carried none of the authority it once commanded. You have no jurisdiction here. The townspeople watched in stunned silence. Some recorded with their phones. Others simply stared, disbelieving, as the man who had ruled their county through fear was reduced to just another arrested suspect. 20 feet away, Trent Holloway emerged with a different escort. Unlike his father, He wasn't even trying to look strong. Tears streamed down his face, and his shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to disappear. "Dad!" he called out, voice cracking. "Dad! Help me!" Dale didn't even turn his head. That final betrayal, his father's silence when he needed him most, seemed to break something in Trent. He collapsed into sobs as agents helped him into a separate vehicle. Elijah stood on the steps with Ava, Monica, and Reverend Price, watching the scene unfold. "It's really happening," Monica whispered. "I never thought I'd see it." "The truth always costs," Reverend Price said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "But lies cost more." In the days that followed, change swept through the town like a cleansing storm. Monica arrived at her damaged store the next morning to find a crowd waiting, not with threats, but with tools, supplies, and donations. Neighbors who had once looked away in fear now stepped forward with support. "We should have stood up sooner," an elderly woman told her, pressing cash into her hand. "Your courage woke us up." By week's end, Vale Fuel and Mart had new equipment, freshly painted walls, and a reopening date circled on the calendar. Deputy Pierce, still bruised but standing taller, gave his formal statement to federal investigators. He turned over years of records he'd secretly preserved. Evidence of complaints buried, witnesses pressured, reports altered. Each file revealed another strand in the web the Holloways had woven through every corner of local law enforcement. "I watched it happen and said nothing," Pierce admitted to Elijah. "That makes me part of it." "You're speaking now," Elijah replied. "That's where change begins." Ava hardly slept. She worked with federal prosecutors to establish a review panel for old cases, particularly those involving civil rights violations that had been dismissed under Holloway's influence. Dozens of families came forward with stories they'd kept quiet for years. "This isn't just about two men," she told reporters gathered outside the courthouse. "It's about dismantling a system built to protect them." On Sunday, Reverend Price's church overflowed with people. They came to honor Nathan Brooks and others whose lives had been damaged by unchecked power. Elijah stood at the pulpit beside a framed photograph of his brother. Young, proud, unbroken. "My brother never got to see this day," Elijah said, voice steady despite the emotion behind it. But he never stopped believing it would come. After the service, the congregation moved outside where a new historical marker stood unveiled near the church entrance. Bronze letters spelled out Nathan's name and acknowledged the injustice he had faced. The marker would remain long after memories faded, a permanent reminder that truth could not stay buried forever. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.